Young, when I was in my early 20s, either in a meditation or in a dream, it's kind of lost on me. This is what was given me, okay? Retooling for our coming of age. The tools that were given by conventional society are given to us so we can be cogs in the wheel of the elites, if you will, right? We're working? Yeah. We're good? Mm-hmm. Whoops. Thank you. And consequently, retooling for our coming of age is the inception of a new format or a new way that we can educate the planet, whether it's starting with little kids, which we are going to do, and it's reacquainting adults with the genius within them. Now, retooling for our coming of age is you cannot get to where you're going, getting through this mess right now, without addressing certain sacred truths that are being hidden from you. And that is, as all of the great sages have said from time immemorial, these things shall ye do and greater things shall ye do. You are all masters or gods or goddesses in the making. Let's not lose sight of that. Now, when I introduced that to the engineering class at the University of Calgary, and I had one of the final assignments on these, my last class had 200 kids in it. But the last assignment was, what did you not know when you came in? What did you learn? And how can it work for you? And almost without exception of the 200, they all wrote, nobody's ever spoken to me like I was a genius. This is unique to this approach. This is unique to this effect. And this is something that not only did I need to hear, it fed something in me that the university system, the engineering faculty, it just doesn't feed. And every one of you needs to wake up to your rightful heritage, because your rightful heritage is you are all absolutely extraordinarily brilliant. And to think otherwise is, in a form, blasphemy. You are all divine, creative beings. Now, one of the things that would happen if everybody started to wake up to the brilliance of who they were is the controlling elites, or the current mainstream media, current mass mind would not be able to function, because you'd start to question things. Just a second, are you telling me that A and B and C, I'm not buying that. And I'm not going to allow that to manipulate my activity or my action. So as this was given to us, retooling for our coming of age, what became prevalent is that I needed to study certain modalities and certain methodologies to help people wake up. And that's what we're here for, okay? So I want to talk about a lumberjack. I want to talk about the story of the lumberjack. The lumberjack shows up at camp and he pitches up to the foreman and he says, I'm here. Like, lo and behold, I'm here. Raise the flags and sing my praises. I'm here to give you a hand. And I will work from dawn to dusk every day. And the foreman goes, great. Go get your gear and away you go. Let's go out. The first day he goes out and he cuts down 18 trees. And he comes down and he's tired and exhausted, but he's feeling pretty full of himself and honed, and he said, this is really good. And the foreman goes, great, 18 trees, that's wonderful. The next day, dawn to dusk, same sort of thing, works really hard, but this time it's only 15. And he's just marginally disappointed or discouraged. Now the third day it's 11, and he's, and the fourth day it's 9, and he kind of looks at the foreman and he goes, I just don't understand it. And what's the foreman say? When was the last time you sharpened your tools? When was the last time you sharpened your tools? You cannot get to where you're going to go using the same modality of what brought you here. Okay? And Einstein did a derivation on that, and that is you cannot think your way out of problems with the same mindset that got you into the problem. Okay? Who says the world is going to hell in a handbasket? Okay? There's something going on right now, and it's not getting better. It is progressively getting worse. Okay? Now, in the course of my misspent youth, I was involved in buying and selling companies. I was involved in managing enormous amounts of money, $75 billion. I was involved in dealing with the global economic scenarios, and I was deeply involved in the awareness of how gamed, how skewed, and how non-functional or efficient the capital markets are. Okay? But what became evident when you start to read these documents that have been around for a long time that the sages have left for us to read is you start to realize that we're at the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And there was a song written about that a while ago in the 60s. But we're leaving one era and we're coming into another one. And we're leaving the era of Pisces, the Piscean age, and we're stepping into the Aquarian age. Now the Aquarian age is the age of group initiation. So we're going to go through a bunch of stuff together. Okay? And these are evolutionary changes. Okay? And the evolutionary changes present themselves in order for us to evolve to the next step of where we're going to launch ourselves. Okay? Now, I want to share with you something. I want to share with you something. That's enough. I want to share with you something that Stephen Jobs, I had the opportunity to meet with Stephen Jobs 3 times. I used to go to the Macworld Expos in San Francisco at the Marconi Center. And I went there 3 times. And the first time I literally chatted with him for 5 minutes, but he was just walking down a hall like this. And he saw me and we engaged with eye-to-eye contact. And he stopped for a moment and I introduced myself and we just had a brief chat. Well, guess the next year, not only did he see me, he came over and said, "You were here last year," and we had a longer chat. And then the 3rd year, it was the same thing, but it was a chat for 45 minutes. We just chatted about what was going on. So because we're in the middle of Facebook Live, because we're in the middle of media that doesn't work, I'm going to give you the crux of this conversation and one of his things. But he said in this video, which we can't show for technical reasons, but in this video he talks about years ago, the people from Scientific American tried to figure out which was the most effective creature on Earth and who used the least amount of energy to travel a kilometer. And what they found in that was the condor was the most efficient had the most efficient use of its body to travel a kilometer. Okay? And man was way down. It was sort of in the 63rd or 65th or 67th percentile. So it wasn't and as Steve puts it, not very good for the crown of creation. But then somebody at Scientific America had the insight to say, what about if we measure man on a bicycle? And as soon as they measured man on a bicycle, the man blew the condor away, like just blew it away by orders of magnitude. So man on a bike, a hooded bike, man on a slipstream bike, all of a sudden a man could travel a kilometer far more efficiently than the condor, using far less energy. And then he goes on to say, and what I think the computer is like a bicycle for our mind. You can use the computer in order to augment, in order to accelerate the capacity of the mind to do things. Now, I would posit this. What if your body, what if your packaging, what if your emotions, what if your intellectual acumen is a bicycle for your genius? What if it's a bicycle for your genius? Now, a guy walks into the doctor and he walks in and he goes, "Doc, I'm all bloated and I'm burping and farting and digestion isn't going very well and I'm having a go." And the doctor says, "Well, why don't we do some tests?" And so, he gives him the skin prick tests and he goes, "Wow, looks like you're allergic to dairy. So what we're going to do is for 6 weeks, no dairy, no butter, no eggs, no milk, no cheese, whatever." And he comes back 6 weeks later and he says, "So, Dave, how are you doing?" He says, not burping anymore, not farting. My friends like me. They invite me over more. I'm digesting food. We're all having a good time." And he goes, "Well, the doctor says you're allergic to dairy." Like, that's easy. What if we're allergic to thoughts? What if we're allergic to the thoughts that says I'm not good enough? I'm not big enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not wearing the right shoes. I'm not wearing the right clothes. I'm not doing the right job. I'm not earning enough money. What if we are allergic to those thoughts? One of the things that all of the sages have taught is this world that we live in, mass mind, the nonsense of mainstream media, is that it's all an illusion. It's all just this story imposed on us. And there's something here to that. There's something to be said about that. Now, we see this. Can you see this? You can see this sort of thing. How many of us have minds like that? Buddha would call this the monkey mind. Now, given that your mind goes like that, we all have, if you had a roommate that hung out with you and talked to you like you talk to yourself, you'd ask the roommate to leave in about 20 minutes, wouldn't you? Are you kidding me, you silly git? Shush. Right? And we walk into this place where your own worst enemy can't harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts. Okay? What we're here to do is wake up to something that is your rightful heritage. It's your rightful heritage. The challenge is you've been programmed to think things that don't necessarily get you along the path of awareness, the path of enlightenment. Okay? Now this is something that Einstein said, and it talks about everybody is a genius. However, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it's going to live its whole life thinking that it's stupid. Who's taken an intelligence course or an intelligence exam and done well or poorly, or both? There you go, right? In a hockey rink, when I was in grade 5 or grade 6, the coach jokingly said, we should get everybody on the team who's going to take this IQ test to just answer A for everything and see what happens. So guess who was silly enough to do that as an 11-year-old? I answered A to everything. Guess who was called into the principal's office? My parents. We're not sure if Jeff is smart enough to carry on in school. So my father took me in, and he was very supportive in terms of, and I said, I wrote, Coach Kahn said just write A for everything, so I wrote A for everything. So I said, okay. So he convinced the school to let me write it again. And then what did they do the next time? How did your son get the key to the answer sheet? Nobody does this. Your intelligence is divinely gifted you. You just have to get out of your way and allow it to come through, okay? And allow it to come through. Because one of the things that not a whole lot of people tell you is this. There are things to be done by you that are done better by you than anybody else on the planet. And when you get that, when that resonates in your very being, it creates enormous change in you, okay? Enormous change in you. This is a time of waking up. And it's a time of waking up because we have things to do. We have to retool. And it's a time of waking up when who's ever felt like they fit in? Who's always felt like they didn't fit in? There you go. Is that the case? And there's something about that, because what's happening is you're not fitting in to the confines and constructs of stuff that's been fed to you or hypnotized you into believing of what you're doing. Your purpose isn't what you do to bring home a paycheck, okay? Your purpose is what you were put on earth to do with such intensity and passion that it becomes a calling. How many of you would leave your job if you got exactly the same pay doing something else? How many? There you go. Okay? That's important. Good old Dax. We just saw this really old picture of you. Carl Sagan used to say, we're all made of stardust. David Suzuki once in a lecture in Vancouver, he was talking about doing the math, the statistical math, and he said, there's an inhalation and an exhalation. You do how many of those in a lifetime? What's the volumetric number? Here's the scientist in us. We do this volumetric, we do this calculation, and we start to figure out, in this room right now, we've all breathed in and out the air, and we've all intermingled that. So he did the calculation that it was Jesus, I think he did the calculation on, but it's either Jesus or Buddha or Lao Tzu or Confucius, doesn't matter, any of the sages. But it said part of Jesus' body is in you, in that you're breathing the same air. I mean, the air doesn't disappear from the planet, it's still here, and it's been around for a while. But Jesus was only around a couple thousand years ago. Actually, I think he's still around, but that's another point of contention. So, we are made of stardust. We've been around for a long time, and the ancients have always told us that. We've just gotten lost in being hypnotized. Okay? Now, these ancient teachings run deep, and they are your rightful heritage. They are things that are yours to provide service to you at all times. And that's why, as we introduce this stuff to you, you oftentimes go to these self-empowerment courses and they say, you know, for $1,999, Jim, you too can be a really handsome guy. Or you too can be a really beautiful girl. Or you too can be really cool and people will like you. The ancients, as we do now, as we start to introduce you to stuff, this is your rightful heritage. How dare it is that I do this? I'm selling a drink and it's a green lidded drink and for $2.99. Like, how can they take it from you and sell it back to you? This is yours. This information is yours. It belongs to you. It's never not belonged to you. The education system is changing. And what we're now going to do is we're going to start to integrate the way we educate, the way we educate our children, the way we educate ourselves in order to affect change on the planet. And it's integrating the mind and the heart. Okay? The head, or the intellect, will tell you what's possible, and the heart will tell you what's appropriate. And one of the things that has happened from time to time is the intellect, certainly in the realm of business, in the business community that I used to deal with, the head would say, let's go rape and pillage and make as much money as possible and take advantage of as many people as we can. Let's game the system so we cannot lose. Here's a little interesting piece of trivia. Did you know for a certain period of time, it was not a month or two, it was 16, 18, 24, 36 months that JP Morgan didn't have one day where they made losses in their trading department? How can you do that? You can't. The system is gamed. When you manage trillions of dollars, the system is gamed, okay? Now all of a sudden, if you start to change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you start to look at things differently, all of a sudden lights start to go on, okay? And look at this. I'm not sure if you can see this. Can you see this? So they're both true, aren't they? And one's a square and one's a circle. How can that be? Can you see it? Sure. How can that be? Right? What we've been told forever is this is what you have to believe is true, but this is equally true, and it's been denied us. Because as soon as you recognize that that's true, and that's true, what it does is it emancipates you from the control that we've been put under, okay? Now the work that we do, and the lights that we turn on, we start to ask, if you will, we start to ask a very important question, and that is, are you capable for just a brief moment to suspend disbelief? And so when Siobhan and Travis and Trevor, David's been around forever, but when they were asked, can you suspend disbelief, they kind of went, okay. And what has transpired in class is you've heard stuff that was completely contrary to what you thought was true. Is that fair? Absolutely. But then when you start to give it an audience, you go, you know, that might be possible, okay? Now here's an example of something that I put towards a whole bunch of engineers in a massive lecture hall, and I said, so we're going to tell you some fantastic things here, and none of them will make any sense, but guess what you get to go do? You get to go and do the research. Some guy, a yogi, showed up. He showed up in a hospital on the East Coast somewhere, and he said, I haven't eaten in 65 years. And what does everybody do? You're a scam artist. And he said, okay, so given that I just made that declaration, and I'm sure he, without a doubt, he was directed to give that declaration. He said, what do you need to be shown for me to prove to you that I don't eat? And they said, well, we'll just monitor you 24/7. And he said, fine, monitor me 24/7. And so they monitored him for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And what conclusion did they come to at the end of the 24/7 monitoring? Well, come on, what did they figure out, Dave?
You didn't eat.
He did, well, I mean, he didn't eat. And then what did they say at the end of it? He's proven what we've told everybody is impossible. He's proven it to be possible, but we're not going to make a big fuss about it, because then it's going to create scenarios where people won't believe it. So why even tell them about it? Right? You don't have to eat to live. He's proven it. Now, many of us, when you stop eating, it doesn't take you very long. However, talk about belief systems and how binding they can be, okay? Now, what's happening right now in this time of revelation is we start to play with some of the stuff that Plato has introduced us to. Okay? And when you start to see beyond the shadows and lies of the culture in order to use to manipulate you, you're not going to be understood. People are going to look at you and go, what is it about you? Why do babies look at you and smile? Why do animals want to jump in your lap and cuddle with you? Like, what's going on? Why is it that you seem to be really calm in the middle of this storm? Now, that may very well happen to us as things start to collapse, because they're going to look at you and go, you probably know the answers. What's happening? What's going on? And when we play the hand of waking up, we play the hand of starting to learn how to change ourselves. There's something about my belief about whatever it is, the shoes I wear, that I need to get rid of. So maybe I need to be less preoccupied with the Lulu or the Yves Saint Laurent or whatever kind of shoes that we're wearing, because I know that those things just hurt in the toes, right? And you want to be able to find the right fit for your fancy Manolo Blahnik shoes. Okay? So the world is changing, and we're on the transition team. Okay. The joy of genius. The joy of genius. This is a great picture, right? Can you see it? That's pretty cool. Something that you might do, right? We talk about how important the cosmos is. We talk about how important the world is. How important is the sun, you figure? You think? If Pluto didn't show up to work tomorrow, like, people would go, it wasn't a planet anyway, no big deal, right? What happens if the sun didn't show up for work tomorrow? Whoa. And you know what's interesting is we've been told, we've been hypnotized into believing that those cultures who thought the sun was a god were all crazy. Well, how important do you think the sun is to us? Without a doubt. And yet, we poo-poo the idea that the ancients thought the sun was of enormous importance. Things are changing. You know, the old is becoming new again. Now, one of the things that happens from time to time is these wise sages, these wise men, they come along and they present themselves to people who are interested in helping and people who are intellectually engaged in pursuing something of the higher order. Okay? And this happened with an individual named Walcool. It happened with 3 or 4 individuals. Now, Walcool has been around for a long time. Some would say he was one of the 3 wise men. Do any of you remember the names of the 3 wise men? Melchior, Balthazar, Melchior, and Caspar. There you go. So he was one of the 3 wise men. The other are Kuthumi, who is here, and the other is Moria, who I don't have a picture of right now. Now, some of these wise sages, they would pitch up and they'd say, do you want to come and we'll have a conversation? So Siobhan, sit down, get your pen out, and we'll have a conversation. Now, Siobhan is a double, triple scientist. And when you have that kind of intellectual acumen, one of the things that happens is the intellectual acumen you have is unbelievably useful to certain things, but it also can restrict your capacity to appreciate that beautiful tree over here, right? And so what Walcool did, is he sat down with a particularly receptive individual named Helena Blavatsky. And they conspired with another variety of masters, Saint Germain and another master named Serapis Bey. And they said, would you help us write a book? And the book's going to be called The Secret Doctrine. So she said, yes, I will write this book. Now, she was from Russian royalty, not the top of the pyramid, but Russian fringe royalty. So she had wealth. And when she was 17, somebody said to her, you know, Helena, you're not very pretty, so if anybody offers to marry you, you better get married, because basically, you may not get many offers. So at the moment you get an offer, take it. So she was very full and she was a firecracker at that point in time, and she was very independent and she was very advanced. It's all unbeknownst to everybody. And at 17, she looked across the room and she said, Blavatsky, marry me. And he went, okay. So she married this guy named Blavatsky at 17. Now there's various changes of the story, but some of the story goes like, well, she kind of looked at him on her wedding night and bolted. Or maybe she hung out for a few months and then she left. And what she did is she went from Moscow, from Russia, she went south into the Himalayas, And she met with many of these great sages, many of which reside in the Himalayas. And she started to do some work with them. And they said, would you help us write a book? And the book was called The Secret Doctrine. And in The Secret Doctrine, which is a challenging book to read, but in The Secret Doctrine, she says, yes, Christianity has valid points, and yes, Judaism has valid points, and yes, Hinduism has valid points, and yes, Jainism, and yes, Buddhism, and all. But it all boils down to this golden thread of truth that underlies all of the teachings. And that is, the Christians didn't have it first. And for them to tell you that Christianity is the be-all and end-all is nonsense. Because they didn't have it, and the Jews didn't have it, and the Hindus didn't have it. It all boils down to stuff that's way older than these conventional things. And so she wrote this book, and the precursor to this book was a book called Isis Unveiled. And it had to do with the Egyptian teachings. So it was brilliant stuff. And at this period of time, the late 1800s in England, it was the peak of our intellectual prowess. We've been dumbed down a bit in the last 100 years or 150 years. Okay? Now, Dwell Cool also showed up to a woman named Alice Bailey, and he said to her, can we do some collaboration? Would you like to help me write? And here's what we're going to do is we're going to develop a kind of a connection, and we'll start writing a paragraph, and then maybe you'll think about me, or you meditate and you listen to me and you'll write down. So it will be inspired writings. And she went, oh no, that's hogwash. And he goes, well, just give it a go first. So they wrote a paragraph, they wrote a chapter, they wrote a couple chapters, and she looked at it and went, wow, this stuff is big. This sage is profound. Maybe I should give him a hand. And they over the next many years, dozens, 10 to 20, 25 years, they wrote 18 books together. Okay? Now this is my teacher. This is one of my teachers, and her name is Dorothy. Her name is Dorothy Gates, and when she was very young, when she was all of about 9 or 10 years old, one of these great masters showed up to her. And they had a conversation with her, and she went on to teach a whole bunch of us. She brought 100 of us to Egypt. 100 of us. She waved her hands and she said, we need the pyramid all to ourselves. And she sent myself and Mufid out to get the pyramid all to ourselves. How do you do that? Like Mufid spoke Arabic, granted, but we just kind of went to the authorities and said, can we have the pyramid all to ourselves? Can you imagine? Guess what they said?
Sure.
They said, yes, of course. And they cordoned off the pyramid and closed it down for hours. Yeah, like, it was again just that part of this magic serendipity that we play with when we start to pursue something of a higher order. Okay? This is a guy named Douglas Baker. Now, Douglas Baker was interacting with one of Dwell Cool's books that he wrote with Alice Bailey, and he was doing some of the exercises that he was working with, and he had what would be called a superconscious experience. And a superconscious experience, as he explains from time to time, is like pulling a fish out of water and putting it onto putting it onto the dock. What does the fish do? It goes, too much oxygen, too much oxygen, too much. Get me back in the water. And that's effectively what happens when we have superconscious experiences. Some of us leave our bodies. Some of us get so blissed out we can't describe it. Some of us, it's a very interesting time. Now, he had this experience with DK, with doing the work that DK did. The book was called Light on the Path, I think. Yeah? Light on the Path. Light on the Path was Patanjali, right? It was the rework of the Patanjali, the Yoga Sutras from Patanjali that Alice wrote, right? Yeah.
Light of the Soul.
Light of the Soul, yes, right. Light of the Soul. You're right, thank you. Douglas Baker started working with Dwell Cool. Now, right next to Douglas, to his right, is a woman, and her name is Kamala Datlai. Now, you want to talk about some serendipity, right? So she was a very advanced yogi. She was a master herbologist. She was a medical doctor. She practiced in Cambridge, England. She was from Delhi. She was a practicing physician, a herbologist, a yogi, and just an extraordinary individual. And she and Douglas Baker were great friends. Now, Douglas Baker took on what Alice Bailey was doing, and Douglas Baker has written not 18, like Alice did. He's written 100 books. 100 books. So in the course of my studies, in the course of me leaving the world, in a meditation, quite diligently, quite brilliantly, I got the spine of a book. I got that sort of right in my vision in the middle of a meditation, and the book was Jewel in the Lotus by Dr. Douglas Baker. So I woke up out of this meditation and I went Douglas Baker and I Googled him, and then I called the guy in London and I said, bang, I want in, and away we go. Okay. So now in the throes of all this, I started studying, and I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe I did the course faster than anybody had done it in the last 40 years. Normally the course took 2.5, 3 years. Some took 4 and 5 years. I did it in 8 months. And while I was doing it, I rewrote it. Because I knew and noticed certain references to that book were not correct. It was this book, and we played with it as we played. And David and I are reasonably diligent students of the Alice Bailey works. And we're now starting to, and what Douglas Baker was given is the opportunity or the directive to conventionalize Alice Bailey's works, because Alice Bailey's works are hard to read, but Douglas Baker work he's starting to change. Instead of how the ancients used to teach, was they used to do this. They used to go, because what they want you to do is they want you to focus on this, but they wouldn't want to tell you. They just say, look over there. Like, let's turn the lights on. Look over there. So they taught by inference. And what DK would do in his books, he'd go, ponder on this. Pay attention to this particular phrase, whatever it is, and ponder, think about it, noodle on it. And whenever you were reading Alice Bailey's books, he'd say, ponder on this, and you'd go, uh-oh, I got to go back and read in order to get the message that was happening. So now, in the course of this, my son-in-law at the time, I said, have you considered, there might be some interesting books you might want to read by this Douglas Baker. And he went, Douglas Baker. I think my dad, maybe I think my grandmother might know him. That name sounds vaguely familiar. So I'm in London a few years ago, and I talked to the guy who's organizing the Clare Day Trust. This man has invited me to be the CEO of the trust. And he calls me up and he says, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going out to dinner with Kamla Datlai. And he goes, Kamla Datlai, she and Douglas Baker were best friends. They were great friends. And so I said, well, great. Do you want to come for dinner? And he was just beside himself. He said, yes, let's absolutely go out for dinner. So when I walked into the room with Kamla, she's 92 here, and she left 2 years ago now. She's 92 here, and she walked in, and she stood bolt upright, and she just walked right across the room of their flat in London. And she held my hand in mine and just stared into my eyes. She said, I know. I've never met her before. 30 seconds staring into your eyes, shaking your hand. I know. And we talked about all kinds of stuff. We talked about Douglas Baker's work. We talked about her work. We talked about the changing times. We talked about the leaving of the Piscean Age and the beginning of the Aquarian Age. We talked about all kinds of really neat stuff. And it was very, very magic. And talk about serendipitous, right? She was the grandmother of my son-in-law. How weird is that, right? We need to be able to know how to change. And if you cannot change your mind, you cannot change a thing. Remember that, okay? One of the things that's happening right now is we're experiencing what's called cognitive dissonance. Stuff is coming to light that makes us go, there's just, that's not in keeping with what we knew. And we need to be keeping our minds open, right? Because open minds are kind of like parachutes. They're good when they're open. They aren't much good when they're closed, right? Now, 30 years ago, you'd go into Harvard and you'd go into their neuroscience department and you'd say, so what do you know about meditation? And they'd go, fluffy nonsense, right? And then finally, some of these scientists that were young enough not to be too jaded by the old ways, they said, well, let's go study meditation. Let's go study the brainwaves. Let's go study what transpires when you meditate. And what's happening now is that the scholars at Harvard, the scholars at Yale, the scholars at Georgetown, the scholars at Johns Hopkins, they've all come to the same conclusion. And what is that? Meditation is beneficial. Absolutely unequivocal. It's not, it's a foregone conclusion. Meditation is absolutely, brilliantly contributive to everybody's health. Now they also went to Tibet and they said to these monks, and what the monks would do is they come out naked or in loincloths. They'd come out naked, and part of their training was, and then they'd be wrapped in wet sheets. And they'd go and sit out in the snow in 0 degree weather. Okay? 0 degree weather. And they'd sit, and they'd meditate, and they'd draw in what we call prana, life force. They'd draw in all this prana, and pretty soon you'd see all this steam coming off the blanket. And in the middle of a couple of hours, the blanket would be completely dry. The surroundings around them would be completely empty of snow. And they'd come out of this meditation and head inside. The power of the mind is absolutely, stunningly brilliant. And if you had any idea how powerful your thoughts are, how powerful your intentions are, and how powerful your attention is, you would kneel at your own feet. You are all brilliant, brilliant geniuses. You are all masters in the making. What we share in the work that we do initially is called the joy material. We have a Hogwarts, we have an esoteric healing, we have esoteric psychology, we have esoteric astrology, we have numerology, we have sacred geometry, we have all kinds of stuff that we are engaged in helping people. The joy material is something that was given us by a master called Hilarion, or rather it was given to him by Paul the Venetian when he was Iamblichus. Iamblichus was a Greek philosopher back in the days, 300 or 400 BC. And it was given to him in Sanskrit, and he translated it into Greece, and then he taught it in Greece. Iamblichus then ascended and became Hilarion the master, and Hilarion gave this work to a woman named Mabel Collins, and he also approached Dorothy to do this work, to contemporize it. So we're dealing with stuff that's 2,000 and 3,000 years old, and I would venture it's probably older than that. Okay? Now these are very simple selections, but they make you go, what? Don't they? You hear them and you go, what? Because what it does is it seems odd at first and it seems incomprehensible at first, correct? And then all of a sudden we go, oh, then we start barking. all of a sudden we start to realize that it kind of doesn't, maybe it does make sense. Is that fair? Okay. So now I want it, for years my wife and I went, and I still have business in France. I'm in the aromatherapy business, and I have many producers, and I have many fields in France that produce for the business that I have, the aromatherapy business. I sell and peddle essential oils. Now what we would do in a field like this is we would have a bus, and 25 of us, I'd just tell the driver, or if sometimes I was driving, we'd stop, or I'd tell the driver, stop, and we'd stop along. France is very, very rural. And we just stop, and I'd get everybody out of the bus, and we'd go into this field. And then we'd go into the field, and it certainly wasn't 108 degrees, but it was in the 90s, probably, high 80s, low 90s, so you could feel the summer, you could feel the heat, and you could see the waves of the ripples of the heat. But then I'd say, listen, 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 what do you hear, what do you hear? And everybody'd look at me like, you're nuts. Crickets? Like, I don't know, my phone, no? Like somebody playing music, and then one of them would go, whoa. And then another would go, the buzzing of the bees. And when one heard it, they'd go, is it, they'd look at me, is it bees? And I'd go, yeah. And then everybody would go, oh yeah, I get it. And then there was this point where all 25 of them would be standing in the field, and they'd go, we got it. We can absolutely hear them. And I'd say, isn't it interesting that 10 minutes ago you couldn't? And then I'd say, can you stop hearing them? Just tune them out? And they'd go, no, I can't not hear the bees. I can't not hear the bees. What a magic place to be, okay? So now, one of the things that happens, and I think it's fair to say, if we ask the students that have done this before, one of the things that happens is when you start to discover this stuff that we're presenting, it's really familiar, even though you haven't heard it before. Is that fair? Yes. And so what Socrates talks about is learning is just remembering, okay? And what teaching does, what we do when we teach, we just turn the lights on. We say, remember this. This is stuff that's all based on your brilliance, and we just get to remember it, and we have to harmonize our package and kind of get out of our own way. Right? Now, one of the things that is hard to fathom in this abstract sense is how we reconcile the scientist in us with the material that we play with, okay? Now, what we do and what we're going to investigate and how we're going to expand this over the next 5, 10, 1500, 200, 500,000 years is we're going to investigate the mysteries of the mind. Now, the Egyptians would say, everything is mental. Everything is mental. That shirt that Travis is wearing right now, the designer goes, okay, it's going to look like this, and it's going to look like this, and he draws it, puts it into a computer thing, he designs it, he creates it, and then he sends it to the fabricator, and it gets fabricated. So it all started out in a mind. The cars that you drive, years before they were produced, the engineers and the designers of the cars, they all got together and said, let's make this car look like this, and it all starts in the mind. The mind starts everything. And one of the basic postulates of the Egyptians was all is mental. This comes from the Kabbalion. Okay? We're going to investigate the mysteries of the mind using ancient techniques. Now, one of the things that's cool about ancient techniques is if they work once and they're tried and true and they're based on cosmic laws, how often will it not work? Never. It's always going to work. And we're going to investigate what's called, those are cool animation techniques. We're going to investigate Gnosticism. Gnosticism comes to us from the word knowing, or knowing. It comes to us from the word knowledge, or knowledge, okay? Now here's something that Manly P. Hall wrote, and I'm going to turn around to read it. The Gnostics held that the essential nature of the human is divine. Oh, does that sound familiar? We heard that about half an hour ago. They look upon men and women as gods and goddesses who have forgotten who they are. Now what we're doing is we're reminding them. It's from this predicament that the Gnostics aspired to be freed by gnosis. Okay? You are extraordinary individuals. You just have to wake up to it and acknowledge it. And as soon as you do, all kinds of stuff's going to happen. Okay? Now he talks about how the well-informed student, if you're sincere in this, much will be shown you. But if you think this is an intellectual exercise, it's kind of like thinking you can drive to Europe or drive to Japan. It's shorter to drive to Japan, I guess, to get to the coast. But you can't. This is not a place you get to with your intellect. Is that fair? You use the intellect, but you use the intellect to realize that the intellect only is this deep. Because there's a difference between knowing and believing, or knowing and thinking. Okay? And should he wander in by accident, it would be wise for him to leave in haste. Okay, here's a question. Is this the sun or the moon? Jim, what do you think? Okay, Dave, what do you think?
We've all seen the video.
Oh, have you all seen the video? Okay, fair enough. Who hasn't seen the video who can answer? Good. We're gonna get some resistance. We're gonna get some resistance from our ego. That, by the way, is the moon. However, you could mistake it for the sun, couldn't you? And one of the things that the ego does is it tries to get in there and it tries to convince you that it's the boss, as opposed to something a little more divine. Okay? And when that happens, you need to be very discerning. Because if you aren't discerning, it can trick you, it can fool you, it can throw wrenches in the gears, can't it? And it does it in a wonderful way. And it just says, as soon as you figure out, as the ego says, as soon as you figure out that I'm powerless, I am hooped. So I'm going to fight and struggle and kick and scream, and I'm going to make a big fuss about it because I want to remain in control. Your thoughts, your stories, who you think you are, they're nothing compared to how truly brilliant you are. Okay? So we're seeing this again. We're revisiting it again. So the ego is the part of the mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. It's like you look at a reflection of yourself in the mirror. Did you know that when you look in the mirror, you weren't seeing who you really are? Think about it. You look in the mirror and you close your right eye. The mirror doesn't show you your right eye. The mirror is a left eye. You have never seen yourself in a mirror as you truly are. Interesting? Right? You're not your packaging. You're not your packaging. Presence, or your soul, or your genius is completely without the distinction. Who you truly are is consciousness, packaged in order for you to facilitate something. Okay? Ships in harbor are safe, but that's not what they were made for. This is a time we've never seen before on the earth. This is a time that is so tumultuous, so full of potential, but also so full of potential calamity and catastrophe. And it behooves us to wake up as this process is going on. This is called the path of return. You're returning home. You're returning home to who you really are. You're returning home to a way that's going to change the world. Now, as D.B. points out, and as many of the sages point out, there's 3 legs to the stool that create an environment where you can be useful to yourself in order to change and awaken yourself, and you can be useful to the world, because as soon as you know how to change yourself, you can help others change themselves. There's 3 legs to the stool. They're meditation, study, and service. It's time to change. It's time to change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Okay. Now there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Lots of people, and we've been trained to do this in our schooling. We've been trained to believe what the teacher says. Enough of that. The messenger is not anywhere near as important as the message. Because you are your own best judge. You are the God that talks about. Okay? You are the God. Now we're going to do something that I don't think I have done in one video, but we're going to remember the Lord's Prayer. Everybody knows the Lord's Prayer? Yeah? So we're going to look at it in an esoteric perspective. And once you hear this esoteric perspective, I suspect, as you 3 or 4 or 5 will attest, you will never look at the Lord's Prayer, never receive the Lord's Prayer, or recite the Lord's Prayer the same way. Who's up for that? You want that? Okay. Our Father who art in heaven. Our genius who is here and illuminates us and ignites us. Hallowed be thy name. I probably don't understand you very well with my intellect, but I certainly respect the fact that we all have a soul or a spirit or a genius. The Greeks called it the daemon. The Romans called it the genius. Hallowed be thy name. I kind of don't understand how you work, but there's sometimes, who has been in the zone in a way where something has transpired and you've just done absolutely brilliant things, and you come out of the zone and you go, I don't know how I did that, but it's pretty cool. Who's been there? There you go. Thy kingdom come, being soul infused, being genius infused all the time. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Perfect divine guidance on earth in this physical body as it is in the higher realms, the higher vibratory realms. Give us this day our daily bread. Feed the body for the moment, because we know now that the body doesn't need food to be sustained, does it? There will be a point in time, I don't know, 10 years, 10,000 years, I don't know when, but there will be a point in time where we won't need to eat. And one of the reasons these yogis come out of the woods and out of the woodwork is they say, listen, we're here to change the way that you perceive things. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. In this time, right now, in this time of revelation, we will have certain things disclosed to us that will make us quite upset and quite disgusted. What is in the throes of being disclosed, what will be disclosed over the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years, will render much of mankind very upset. And boy, when you get upset, what do you want to do? You want to fight, you want to seek retribution, you want to do a bunch of that stuff. Forgive us. And forgive those who trespassed against us. It's a time of forgiveness, and it's a time of losing the desire to fight back and bite back. Okay? For thine is the power of the genius, the power of being in that zone, forever and ever. You are eternal beings. You have a package that may not be eternal this go around. However, Jesus showed us that he could make his package eternal, didn't he? It's one of the greatest facades, right? Is Jesus died. Just a second, didn't he come back and said, I'm not dead. Isn't that a bit of a meme going on there? Isn't that a bit of a, I'm not dead, I'm here. I'm every bit as a feel me. I did this in order for you to do it. These things shall ye do, and greater things shall ye do. It's a very magic time, forever and ever. Amen. Change the way you think about the Lord's Prayer? Yeah?
To me also, I don't but the daily bread might also be symbolic for information, knowledge.
Absolutely. 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 Being able to see things as they are rather than as somebody who has an agenda to share stuff with you. Yes? Absolutely. One of the things that happens as we wander through this stuff is we have to develop a discipline and have to develop a regimen that creates patterns of thinking and patterns of behavior that are conducive to you waking up. Okay? And that's what Thoreau mentions, right? To make a deep physical path, we walk again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the kind of thoughts we wish to dominate our lives. Now, one of the things that Mahatma Gandhi talked about is, you are what you think. Be careful what you think. You had any idea how powerful your thoughts are, you would be ever reminded of what you think. And as we talked about in the very beginning, be careful about it. If you had a roommate who talked to you like you talk to yourself, whoa, right? Now here's what we're going to attend to. We're going to talk about cosmic laws. And there's lots of them, hundreds. But we're going to talk about laws. Cosmic laws, the laws of Mother Nature, are descriptive in their capacity. The laws that we deal with in society are prescriptive. Okay? We're going to talk about Hermetic principles. We're going to visit and welcome and embrace Egypt, ancient Egypt, and what they have brought to bear and what we're doing. We're going to talk about esoteric science, and the scientists in us. When we first start investigating this stuff, you just go, holy smokes, I had no idea how comprehensive it is. Whole new fields of investigation are opening up right now in terms of the esoteric sciences. Now what happens is, years and years ago, we would look at the spectrum of light and it would be this big. How much of it could we see with the human eye? In a spectrum that big, we could see with the human eye a single sheet of paper. That's how thin our human. Does it mean the rest of it doesn't exist just because we can't see it? And that's what's about to come right now. This time of revelation is all kinds of things that are going to come out, and all of a sudden people are going to go, wow, you mean we can actually use this for our own benefit? Yes, absolutely. Okay. We're also going to study symbolism. Now, one of the things that DK said, one of the things that many in all of the sages have said, is that our soul speaks to us in images, in symbols. We need to learn about symbols. We need to learn about what they mean and how they can be used to further our genius or further our soul's agenda. And it's all within you. All of it is within you. And when you begin to know yourself and understand yourself, you'll realize that it's all within you. Now we're going to talk about the mind and how it is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. So this is the thing that says you aren't who you think you are. You aren't even who others think you are. You are who you think others think you are. And you're lost. Do you want to know? Do you want to go there? Do you want to start an avenue of investigation that perhaps turns the lights on so brilliantly that you have to let go of who you were in order to become who you would be? Now, one of the things the scientist in me sort of brings this stuff up yet again, and we look at this stuff and we think, how comprehensive is it? Well, I mean, there's that key, astrological. There's the astronomical. There's the anthropological, the geometrical, the metaphysical, the mystical, the physiological, the numerical, and the symbolic. You ready to dive in? And go where few dare to go. You want to be on the team that's waking up, or do you want to be on the team hiding your head in the sand? Now here's something that somebody told me years ago. You get to choose. You get to choose whether or not you hide your head in the sand. You get to choose that. You can choose to hide your head in the sand or not to hide your head in the sand. What you don't get to choose is the consequences of those actions. So you can hide your head in the sand, but you cannot hide from the consequences of hiding your head in the sand. Who thinks hiding your head in the sand is the answer? Now, when we start to wake up, when we start to look at what's happening, things do not look like how you think they're going to look. Is that fair, guys? This looks nothing like, I mean, you read this and we wander through this and we see a video and we're gonna open it up to questions. But one of the things that happens is this path does not look like you think it's going to look. And that's important to remember, isn't it? And make no mistake about it, enlightenment is destructive. Okay? It has nothing to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of truth. It's seeing through the facade of pretense, and it's the complete eradication of everything we imagined to be true. And it's big, because during this time, a whole bunch of things are going to be disclosed in a manner that's going to make us go, good grief, we had no idea what's going on. Now, peace isn't shelter from the storm, it's serenity within it. Now, this waking up process, this time of revelation, it presents itself so that you can contribute to the evolution of mankind. Who's up for that? The work you do and the work we collaborate to do is stunningly powerful, stunningly so. Any of you know chemistry other than you? There's in a chemical event, you will take some compound and you will add literally a few drops of something to it, and you will change that. And we call these catalysts. We are all being called to be catalysts in something that's going to contribute to the evolution of mankind. And this catalyst is called enlightenment. And as you light up and as you change, you affect mankind. And it's important. There are those who show you the way. There's those who get in the way. And there are those who've lost their way. Which one of these would you rather be? And make it so. That's a drop of water. Isn't that cool? That's a drop of water. Now, there's something very esoterically significant about the rose, isn't there? Who knows about all the stuff that's happened with the rose? Right? The fragrance of roses, rose petals. A rose by any other name. Yeah, exactly. Here's what we do. I'll be back again in a month-ish. We partake of inviting people into the joy class. We don't charge for it. Every now and again, people pitch in some money to cover expenses, 10, 20 bucks a month, and we've done that for years. But we don't charge for the joy class, because it's yours. How could we charge you for something? Like, take that dress off and put it on that rack, and then I'll sell it back to you? Like, that's ridiculous. We don't. What we do want to do is turn the lights on so brightly that people can't ignore it. We want to emancipate ourselves from our old ways of thinking. We want to emancipate ourselves from our old ways of thinking. Now, what we do when we get together Mondays or Tuesdays, we cover the same material. And we get together jointly with Calgary. And so when I'm in Calgary, I teach Monday and Tuesday evenings in my lamasery, which is now about this big. And we put 12, 15, 18, 20, 25 people in the lamasery. And we work on these joy materials, we work on symbology, we work on ancient stuff that's been presented to us. And then we have discussion. And sometimes I don't say a thing, because it behooves you to speak to what we're teaching you. We do that. There's 6 selections, so it's 12 weeks. The selection, everybody sits down and goes, this makes no sense at all. Dude, what do you think? And then the next week there's the explanation. And when you start to see the breadth and comprehensive nature of these explanations, you start to go, wow, there's more to this stuff than meets the eye. Is that fair? Is that fair? And we do that for 12 weeks. A semester is 12 weeks. Now, is it also fair to say, as David has done this many times, I've done it 19 times, is it fair to say for those who've done it more than once, as you may see in some of the testimonials, either on the website or on Facebook, you take it a second time and it seems as if you didn't even take it the first time. The insight that you get into doing this is quite profound. It's quite profound. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to provide you tools to change the very fabric of your reality. And boy, there is a wind blowing that's going to be helpful in that regard. This is called the law of acceleration. It's speeding everything up. It's speeding everything up. We're going to give you tools. At times it's kind of like Hogwarts, is it not? Is that fair? Yeah, exactly. So it's important. So that's the next step. We'll be back again to do another open house sometime in August. I'm not exactly sure when. I will announce it and let you know. And we're going to start the semester on the 11th of September. Okay? Now, it isn't just joy. You do and you become conversant with joy, and then we start to entertain into the Egyptian mystery schools. And then we start to work, and we're going to be doing some work in the fall on Hogwarts, for better or worse. We do white magic. We teach you magic. And what's going to happen is you're going to go, really? I've known it all along that we've been doing this and this and this. It's all part of it. This is big. This is very big. And we invite you to wake up. We invite you to wake up because this is yours. We're just here to give it back to you. Okay? And I will open the floor to questions. Because sometimes the questions are way more important than the presentation. And sometimes when you've seen the presentation and you've had a chance to think about it, you need to ask good questions too. No worries. So much so, yes, that you got all that. Okay, questions? Yes.
Would you be getting into holographic world fractals and things like that, such as reality, those kinds of things?
Yes.
Okay, that is part of the...
It's part of the evolution of the curriculum, yes. Sacred geometry is part of what we teach, yes. Sacred geometry is part of what we teach. 12 weeks. 12 weeks. 6 selections. Yeah. Starts beginning September, ends end of November, early December.
Consecutive.
We go 12 weeks, we take a week off, then December comes, and then we go 12 weeks in the winter and 12 weeks in the spring. No, just Monday or Tuesday. Monday or Tuesday. 12 weeks. So it's once a week, 12 weeks. Once a week for 12 weeks. It's for a couple of hours.
So you block that time out.
And what we do is when I'm here, and we'll do it live, and we'll figure out where we do it. We haven't figured out where we're going to do it yet.
Is it podcast?
We haven't podcast it, but we go live like we do now. So we have a classroom that we've used that's sometimes very effective, sometimes it freezes. So we're trying to work out those glitches. But we have this last semester we had 8 to 12 people attending remotely, and then we'd have 12 to 16 people attending live each Monday and Tuesday. So our student body is 40, 45. And what I've been directed to do is do it in Scottsdale and build this foundation in Scottsdale for a variety of reasons.
So basically the curriculum is following the teachings of Taylor, right?
Of who?
I'm sorry.
Dwal Cool?
Cool.
Well, no. The teachings, the selections come to us from Hilarion, the master Hilarion. But what's happened is that all of these sages have conspired to do things. So what they've all done is they've said this thing called esoteric science has to do with these selections, understanding, marrying the lower mind or the intellect to the higher mind or the contemplative mind. And it's in that connecting of those minds, and in the meditation, the study, and the service, those connections that all of the masters have aimed and pointed out. So they all collaborate in getting us to the same place.
So this person that you just mentioned, sorry,
Dual, cool? No? Hilarion.
Okay, so and of course he came before who, correct?
Well, they are, let's say that they are approximate contemporaries.
Okay, so there is trying to figure out the relationship between those two.
They are all brothers. They are all brothers in order to bring about a change, in order to bring about the enlightenment of mankind.
Now, how was this information anchored? Has it been channeled? Did someone actually show up in physical form? Intuition? How
Okay, subject to, it now presents itself that I probably need to repeat the question just for that we can get it on. How did this happen? Did it happen through channeling? Did it happen through live? Did it happen through right? It happened through a variety of those and a combination of them. These masters, Dwal Kul, Moria, and Saint Germain, and Dwal Kul, Moria, Saint Germain, Kuthumi, all showed up physically for Helena Blavatsky. And they developed a rapport, and then they'd say, on Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, tune in and we'll communicate with you. So when you develop a rapport with a master, when you develop a rapport with a child, right? You think very hard about the child, or the child thinks very hard of the parent, and all of a sudden you go, there's something's going on, right? So there is an aspect of telepathy when it comes to it, and there are some mediums who have proven to be quite successful in terms of transmitting this information. So it is a combination of all of those. Any other questions?
So, with other people that might be interested, you're going to do open house in August.
Correct.
They still then join us semester.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What has tended to happen in the past is that people who are a little, I don't know what the word is, who are a little sort of, I'm going to check this out. What happens is after the first or second or third week, they all go, holy smokes, there's way more to this. Can I bring a friend? Can I bring a friend? Can I bring a friend? Now, after the first selection, yeah, of course. After the second selection, maybe, as long as they've seen the video. But after the third, all of a sudden, we're so far in that it builds, it all builds. The third selection builds on the first and the second. The fourth selection builds on the first, second, and third. So you can't bring people in too late. But yes, that's what we're here to do. We're here to help turn the lights on. And I think what's happening is there's now a hunger. Certainly I've sensed it, but there's now a hunger to wake people up. And people are really hungry to find this kind of information because it proves to be absolutely invaluable. Give us this day, our daily bread. Exactly right. Okay. We're all good? Thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to be of service. We're blessed. Blessed to have you here. Thank you.